very esteemed partners with whom we've put this event together. BAIF Development Research Foundation, the European Dairy Association, the International Dairy Federation, the Canadian International Development Research Center, the CGIAR Livestock and Climate Initiative, and the World Bank. And I also want to, as I mentioned, acknowledge some of the work that really have helped us to frame this together. When we look at things, 2030 is not far away. And we can only get to 2030 with some solutions or indications of that. We can bring solutions through partnerships like this. I think the whole event today is underpinned by successful and innovative partnerships. So that's really the importance of what I want to mention here today. The group of partners have come together to highlight the importance of improving animal health to help achieve climate change adaptation and mitigation goals. We will be discussing the different approaches needed in different livestock production systems and the role that climate finance can play in helping livestock keepers achieve better health and their animals. On the slide that you have on the background, the top right, we're really underscoring here the diversity of the livestock systems. And I think our solutions really have to take into consideration that diversity so that we can deliver what is really needed in those production systems. The main objectives of the session is really to illustrate how working on animal health looks different in different settings and the possible pathways to include animal health outcomes in climate finance. To set the scene, I think there are two things I would like to mention. One is the climate crisis poses significant threat to humanity with far-reaching effect on weather patterns, sea levels, and agriculture. I think that's something that we all know. It is important to reset that. Secondly, the livestock sector is especially vulnerable, facing challenges as both contributor to greenhouse gases and as a victim to climate change. And I think that's the nexus we really have to address here. The livestock paradox, livestock production contributes to global greenhouse gases emission, particularly methane from animal ruminant fermentation. At the same time, the livestock sector provides essential nutrition for billions of people, and we should say that up to 1.7 billion people in the global south depend directly and indirectly for livestock production. And I think it's really important for us to see how it is vital for combating problem of malnutrition and micronutrient deficiency. The next thing I would like to say is how do we meet the growing demand of animal source food? We know the population is growing while mitigating its environmental impact. And I think this is what in this session, we want to use animal health as a main driver to address this challenge. We do see animal health as an untapped solution. Improving animal health offers a powerful and cost-effective solution to the conundrum of livestock and the climate. Diseases cause significant losses in livestock production, with an estimated 20% of global livestock production lost annually. If we're losing that much, or that percentage of animals, what's the impact on climate and the total emission broadly? This means that less food and higher greenhouse gases will be emitted, leading to less milk and meat as we go forward. Some preliminary results from our work in two countries that I want to highlight goes as follows. In Tanzania, pregnancy losses in dairy cattle increased greenhouse gases emission intensity up to 14%, and that will continue to grow if we don't do anything. In Kenya, where I'm connecting from to you today, the death of beef calf before 1 year of age escalate greenhouse gases emission intensity by 6% for beef production. So that's really going to increase, as I said, if we don't do much really to control animal health. These losses represent a significant nutritional void equivalent to the protein requirement of millions of people. And I think that's really underscoring the importance of just moving the needle by ensuring that we have healthy animals. There are proven strategies that we can highlight. We have the tools and knowledge to significantly improve animal health and reduce the environmental impacts of livestock production, especially in smallholder systems in low and middle income countries. Previously, supporting smallholder systems was very difficult because solutions were really not customized. And I think the work that we celebrate at the International Livestock Research Institute with partners globally shows that for the past 20 years, it's really possible to deliver solutions targeting a wide range of small-scale producers. And also, it's important for us to highlight that up to 70% of livestock-derived product are going to be delivered by small-scale producers. And I think it's important for us to think about small-scale producers, especially with our intervention, to transition from subsistence to really profit-making enterprises. Some of the proven technologies include vaccination. Implementing widespread vaccination program can effectively curb the spread of infectious diseases that lead to abortions, calf mortalities, and reduced productivity. Enhancing veterinary services is also another intervention that's proven to work. Investing in this veterinary infrastructure, diagnostic tool, and training for animal health professionals can enable early disease detection and treatment, minimizing the losses that we have demonstrated through our work. The third intervention that's proven to work is really around management practices. Simple measures such as good hygiene on farm can drastically reduce disease transmission and improve overall animal health. Optimizing also nutrition is really important. Balanced and nutritious diets tailored to livestock-specific needs can bolster their health, productivity, and resilience to diseases that are increasingly in the production systems. This includes exploring innovative feed additive that can reduce feasible for farmers to access these technologies. The final thing that I want to talk about in terms of proving technologies is really using animal breeding to underpin some of this. It is important and possible that we can prioritize the breeding and selection of animals for disease tolerance, and particularly environments where we need to support animal resilience in the face of heat stress and also emerging infectious diseases. We want a robust animal in some of those systems. Let me talk about the economic and social benefits of the intervention that we are proposing. Investing in animal health yields substantial economic and social benefits, specifically focusing on increased productivity, reducing emission, enhancing food security, and improving the livelihoods. These are some of the quick wins that we can demonstrate. And the key question is, how can we build on the partnership that we have around the table here and beyond to continue to drive that in the future? How can we unlock that potential using the climate finance? The widespread adoption of these solutions, the solutions that I've mentioned, especially in developing countries, require adequate financial support. We know that small-scale livestock production is currently woefully underfunded when it comes to climate finance, receiving that less than 1% of public and private climate finance. And I think we see the opportunity cost that we face here. If we were to go beyond the 1% and 10% and things like that, I think we all see the benefits that we can bring, not only for the environment, but also socio-economic development. Climate finance can play a crucial role in helping improve animal health through the following suggestions: providing grants and concessional loans to government to invest in animal health infrastructure, technologies, and training for livestock keepers. It can also help to develop innovative financial instruments and risk-sharing mechanism to incentivize private sector investment in sustainable livestock practices. Finally, supporting research and development of new animal health solutions adapted to different production systems and agroecological zones. And this really speaks to the work that we are very proudly leading with a range of partners, ensuring that we innovate in the animal space. And you see it on the slide that I provided here, some of those innovation drivers that we hope we can bring to help 5 days. What's the way forward? Here's my call to action. One, we need to integrate animal health into national climate commitment and actions plan, recognizing its potential for both mitigation and adaptation. And I think we have a distinguished panel that will discuss this further. Secondly, we need to increase funding for animal health programs, particularly in low and middle income countries. And we can say from first-hand experience that our work is hindered in this part of the world because of limited funding. Not only funding coming to ILRI and the CGR, but funding really supporting our very distinguished partners in the countries to ensure that we have the best diagnostic tools, and some of those innovations that we're talking about can really be adopted in the countries. And I think some of these solutions and technologies really exist somewhere, and how we could put that together is really the key thing. And I'm hoping that through the panel discussion, we should be able to, to address that. Beyond my call of action, let me just say that investing in animal health has a triple win solution for climate action, food security, and the overall socioeconomic livelihoods. And finally, by working together, we can unlock the full potential of the livestock sector to contribute to a more sustainable and equitable future for all. Thank you so much, distinguished panelists, and for the opportunity to frame these remarks as we start this side event. Thank you, Laura. Back to you.
Let's appreciate Apollinaire for those remarks. Thank you so much. It was a real honor to have you give those opening remarks. And I really appreciate that you mentioned there is a diversity of systems where we need to have different approaches for different systems, but some of the solutions will be present across all of those. So you mentioned vaccination, you mentioned optimizing nutrition, genetics. So all of those things are important, but what they will look different in those different systems. And I think the panel that we have here today can really speak to that diversity of systems. So I'm really pleased to welcome all the panelists up here. I'll read out their bios. We have some very distinguished guests, and then we'll get right into the questions for them. So our first panelist here is Gilles Fremont. He's the president of the International Dairy Federation and is a senior dairy leader recognized in Canada and worldwide. He's also a professional economist and policy advisor. He has firsthand knowledge of farming in Canada from growing up on a family farm near Joliet, Quebec. Gilles joined the IDF board in 2020 as a representative elected by the General Assembly. He's Vice President of Government and Industry Relations for Lactalis Canada, and he was elected IDF President in October 2024. So welcome, Gilles. I'll do everyone, and then we'll get into the questions. Sophie Gregory is a first-generation organic dairy farmer based in Dorset, England. She's managing 1,400 acres with her husband. She used to be an accountant, but I think made a good choice to get into dairy farming. And she transitioned to farming and is passionate about promoting organic practices and career opportunities in agriculture. As a Newfield Scholar, she researches the future of organic dairy farming and engages with the public to raise awareness about the sector's importance. Welcome, Sophie. We have next Dr. Barak Kakade. He's the president and managing trustee of BAIF Development Research Foundation, which is an NGO working on rural livelihoods through sustainable management of natural resources. And they've been doing that for the past 55 years, with work spreading across 13 states in India, covering over 3 million rural families. Dr. Kakad has contributed to many innovative rural development projects and was instrumental in developing a sustainable rural livelihood under the World Bank's supported National Agricultural Innovation Program. We also have Georgina Kemp down there. She's the Senior Program Specialist at Canada's International Development Research Centre. She supports adaptation research projects across Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and she leads the Step Change Initiative, which is a Canada-Netherlands partnership that supports locally led adaptation in the Global South. And finally, last but not least, we have Bill Sutton down there from the World Bank. He's the global lead for climate smart agriculture and lead agricultural economist in the World Bank's Agriculture and Food Global Practice. He's worked for over 25 years to promote sustainable development by integrating across sectors including agriculture, environment, and climate change, and leading both investment and analytical projects in East Africa and the Pacific, Europe and Central Asia, Sub-Saharan Africa, and the Middle East and North Africa. So we have a real range of experience and diversity of systems up here. And we'll do some time with some questions that we'll go through, and then we want to open it up to you as well, to the audience. And I do acknowledge we have some people online as well, registered observers who have joined virtually. So welcome to those who are listening online, and thank you very much for joining in. So I first want to come to Gilles, and we know the International Dairy Federation has 39 member countries and represents 74% of global milk production, which is very impressive. What do you see as the main challenges faced by dairy farmers in terms of animal health, and how is it different between the countries and contexts that are represented within your federation?
Well, first of all, thank you very much, Laura. Thank you for the organizers. Very pleased to be here today. I would say at the outset, I would agree on diversity. I think it's not really one size fits all. You know, every farm system will fit for its best context. And we have dairy farms across the world varying significantly. And this is shaped by regional practices, by environmental, economic resource available. And like I said, each system will be the best fit for its own context. Most global dairy farms are still family run, including those, you know, with the pasture system like New Zealand, like Ireland, for example. You also have the other side, the intensive farming, such as the US, Netherlands, which focus on high output and advanced technology, always trying to optimizing efficiencies. And you have smallholder and cooperative farms that are common in developing regions, such as India or some part of Africa or other areas of the world. I would say, you know, there are several factors that will influence animal health on farms, and of course, it goes without saying, healthy animals is a more productive one, and more productivity means increase, you know, reduction of footprint overall. So the health status of animals is very directly related to milk production and overall productivity. And I think this is a fact that's very well understood by farmers. Safeguarding and enhancing animal health is essential in increasing not only productivity, but also welfare and health of animal, and are key to management practices. And, you know, when you look at management practices, you can think of other health, which I'll talk more, controlling disease outbreak, enhancing feed efficiency, and so on. And maybe in Canada, the country where I come from, our dairy farmers, there's an association called Dairy Farmers of Canada, which has set a goal of, you know, to be net zero by 2050. And they released a publication about a year and a half ago called Best Management Practice. This is aiming at reducing GHG, and they found that those factors that we're talking about have contributed to reduction of GHG by up to 24% in the last between 1990 and 2019. And they evaluate 30 different best management practices. But I'll dig a little further, if you allow me, into some specifics. So other health, you know about mastitis. You know, mastitis is an inflammatory condition of the mammary gland that usually caused by an infection. And it usually reduces milk production and alter its composition. So, of course, the milk quality typically is measured by by the presence of somatic cell count, which is a key indicator of other health. And when you have cow that has mastitis, of course, not only you can have wasted milk because milk needs to be discarded and so on. So there's several factors. While a healthier cow will help us, moving forward. It improves animal welfare. It reduces food waste, and of course, it enhances the production efficiency. Animal reproduction is another area that we should be looking at and be concerned. And it's a real opportunity to reduce GHG. There's a study that was done recently by FAO and Global Dairy Platform in 3 countries, Chile, Kenya, and the UK, where they tried to measure the reduction of GHG, followed by health measure. And it was found that better control of mastitis reduced the GHG emission by about 6%, and those aiming towards better animal reproduction, there was quite a fluctuation, but the improvement was anywhere between 7 and 24%. Dairy nutrition, I mean, feed is very important as well. So it's always, there's always a link with good, efficient feed to make sure that your production is increased, thereby reducing emission intensity, around. Calf care is another area that's essential for improving. You're looking at the future generation of cows. So it starts with adequate colostrum feeding, which support a strong immune system in the animal and a healthy growth, and making sure that those animals grow in optimal condition. And of course, what we need to avoid is disease outbreak. Because those outbreak, when you have an outbreak, a disease outbreak, it really increases emission. We've seen it. You take the case of blue tongue, for example. We know that it results in very large increase in GHG emissions. So I would say overall, by looking at and focusing at animal health, farmers will not only boost their productivity, but also contribute to a more sustainable, environmentally friendly dairy systems that will help us all mitigate those climate changes. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gilles. And I really like that quote, a healthy animal is a more productive animal. And I think that's something really important to take away. If you take away, something from this, maybe it's not the facts and figures or the new diseases you've never heard about, but a healthy animal is a more productive animal. So I want to go all the way down to Georgina. So we heard some of what Gilles said about treating mastitis, about focusing on reproduction, on nutrition and feed, calf care. So I think those are coming from the International Dairy Federation, but for IDRC, you're supporting a new climate smart livestock program in sub-Saharan Africa. Mm-hmm. And can you talk to us more specifically about that context and what are some of the major research priorities that came out of the consultative process that I know you carried out with livestock farmers, animal health practitioners, and researchers from sub-Saharan Africa as you were putting that new program together?
Thanks, Laura. I was sort of relaxing on this end, thinking you were moving down, so this is good. So before I speak about some of the outcomes of this consultative process that we did lead across the entire sub-Saharan African continent, I want to just spend a moment talking about what it means to be a livestock holder in that context, because this context is very different to the other contexts that I think that you will hear about. So in sub-Saharan Africa, over 80% of agricultural land is used for grazing. 75% of that is used by smallholder farmers. So this is the kind of environment we're speaking about. Livestock supports between 110 and 120 million people in East and West Africa alone. So we're not even accounting for Southern Africa there with those numbers. So when we talk about livestock, we're talking about a really fundamental resource in rural African economies, but it goes further than that, because livestock are much more than just income for smallholder farmers in this region. Livestock are key to food security, but they're also key to cultural identity. We're talking about personal prestige. We're talking about a central piece of marriage contracts. We're talking about a critical resource during times of economic crisis. Families will sell livestock to pay school fees, to buy school uniforms. In many regions where I come from in South Africa, livestock are the way in which farmers access ancestors. If you can't access ancestors, you have all kinds of well-being implications, even health implications. So we're talking about more than just an economic resource here, and I think we need to remember this as we think about what we're speaking about. Climate change is threatening productivity across these systems. Rising temperatures and irregular rainfall patterns in particular are impacting on animal health, grazing land quality, and water resources. And without intervention, we're only going to see growing impacts on these systems. So in this context, IDRC and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation partnered in 2023 to create the Fund for Future Climate Smart Livestock Systems in Africa called RECAF. And as part of the launch of that program, we ran this consultation process because context is everything, and we really want to make sure that this program speaks to the specific needs of different regions. And so, as Laura said, we did engage with a range of different stakeholders across West Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa, and Central Africa. So I'm going to give you just like a whistle-stop tour of some of the key research priorities that we heard from this very diverse set of stakeholders. I do have a synthesis report that I can share, and it's like a laundry list of needs, but I'm just going to give you the top few. So we're being urged to focus on water, pastures, and feed management. For example, we've been asked to focus on increasing the reliability of water resources for livestock and improving resilience to drought conditions. This may involve implementing water management strategies such as water storage, efficient irrigation, and water conservation practices. There's many other examples. The second big theme we've been asked to focus on is in indigenous knowledge systems. So focusing on documenting existing climate smart innovations and practices that have been tested across multiple contexts. We're not looking to parachute in the latest technology. We need to start from what people are already doing, build out from there. Very often livestock owners' existing practices already tell us what works and what's needed in that place, but the question is, how do we support those practices? The third big area we've been asked to focus on is integrating renewable energy and circular economies into these systems. So focusing on, for example, integrating livestock systems with other kinds of farming systems, such as agroforestry, silvopastoral systems, really looking to promote sustainable land use by combining livestock grazing with tree cultivation and enhancing ecosystem services and biodiversity. The fourth big area we've been asked to focus on is looking at the barriers to adoption of existing technologies. So why are there technologies that already exist? And I've just come out of the Adaptation Gap Report launch. One of our big findings is that we do not have a lack of technology for adaptation. The problem is about access to those technologies, and it's about the capacity to use them. We have mature technology. We just have to figure out how to get that out to people who need them. And one of the key aspects that this consultation told us to do was really focus on public-private partnerships to try and get that right. The fifth area is to focus on capacity building. So linked to this issue of technology, the one there I'll just highlight is implementing comprehensive training programs aimed at equipping farmers with the knowledge and skills needed to adopt climate smart practices, covering such diverse areas as effective business management, value addition in livestock production, and access to broader markets. And the very last one I'll just mention is a sort of a bucket of research questions around animal health. So we've been encouraged to support research on improved control and prevention strategies for emerging and re-emerging animal diseases, looking at vaccines, biosecurity, One Health, and particularly taking a transboundary sort of look at these diseases. And at IDRC, we already have a program that's really focusing in on neglected diseases and the gendered dimension of what kind of livestock are kept by different members of households. We're not just talking about a unity of a household household or a farm, we have some species that are really looked after by women and some by men. And the reality is that those species that are looked after by women tend to be neglected in terms of vaccines, etc. So we're also working on that area. I'll stop there, Laura.
Thank you so much, Georgina. And I think that really is comprehensive, and I'm glad that animal health came out within those consultations as one of the key research areas that needs to be worked on. But other things as well, the water and pastures and feed management, the indigenous knowledge, figuring out how to lower those barriers to adoption. I think, it kind of drives home the point that we can't just focus on one thing. We need to look at these systems as a whole. So moving from sub-Saharan Africa, we have Sophie here as a dairy farmer in the UK. Some of those challenges that you just heard Georgina mention might seem very foreign to you. But from your perspective as a dairy farmer, what are your main challenges in ensuring healthy animals, and especially coming from your organic perspective? And is it a concern to you, or how do you kind of consider how you can lower your methane emissions? Are you doing your own calculations? Is this something that is on your radar as something to contribute to? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks so much for asking me. It's a real pleasure to be up here as a farmer, and just so important to get farmers in the room. Yeah, I suppose main challenges in terms of animal health, it seems very apt talking about this, but actually some similarities. Climate change actually within Europe has actually been a big thing. There's a new normal now, which actually then has an impact on some of the cycles of some of these parasites that we deal with on farm. So we're talking, milder winters and things, worm burdens and things like that. We're seeing things happen at different times in the year, and it's learning to cope with them, and specific things to different regions. Everything from ticks through to actual lungworm, they're coming at different times. So it's that's health of the animal that way from external things. Also crops, what crops that we can grow now, and when we grow them, and actually how nutritionally dense they are, to then how much milk we can produce out of them is becoming a challenge. I think for some people it's been great having hot, droughty. We've had to really think about what crops we grow, but it's remembering this probably is the new normal now, the way we're dealing with weather. And the other thing probably for us is policy. That is actually a challenge, because when we're talking about animal health in the UK, we have something called TB, tuberculosis. It's run by there's lots of theories around how it spread, but policy can have a big impact actually on how that's then dealt with on farm. So that's a challenge. In terms of measuring our carbon footprint, we've been measuring our carbon footprint on farm for the last 7 years through our milk buyer. We supply a European cooperative called Arla. It's about 7,500 farmers across Europe. And just this year, we've now started being rewarded for that on a point system. And actually, it's making farmers really think about actions they make on farm, to actually relating that to climate impacts, to then their pockets, because they're actually being rewarded for the right decisions they're making. So one of them is animal robustness, and that scores on it, and that's actually around our replacement rate and how many animals extra we're having to bring in through losses. So that focuses in on the animal health angle. So I think, as with most things, money talks. So when farmers start being rewarded for climate climate rewards they're bringing themselves from the farm, then that makes people change behaviour. So climate change policy, and we are being rewarded on farm now, just in the last year.
That's really interesting. Thank you so much. I'm taking lots of notes because I really want to learn more about that reward system. I think incentives, like you said, that's really the way we need to start going, because for farmers, it is, of course, you have the environmental goals in mind, but at the end of the day, you're a business person and you need to also be looking at your bottom line. So thank you so much for that. And we're moving to another different context now. So Dr. Bharat, from your perspective from India, that's very different from sub-Saharan Africa. It's very different from the UK. I'm sure there are some similarities as well in what you've heard. But for your perspective, what are the most pressing needs in India for improving animal health, and how might you improve farmer adaptation and resilience by improving the health of your animals?
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Laura. Very pertinent question, and thank you for this opportunity. I think we are in alignment. Number one, that everyone here, particularly the panel members, so far exact alignment that livestock is an important resource. It contributes to a great extent for the food security, livelihood security, and especially in Indian context, 2/3 of Indian rural population, they depend on their livelihood for the day-to-day earnings on animal, whether it is large ruminant or small ruminant, but there's a great level of dependency on animals for the livelihood of the people. As we know that India is the largest producer of the milk globally. We have the largest number of population of the animals within one single country, and hence our challenges are very different. Challenges are different. Maybe the context is similar. Most of the livestock rearing in India, unlike in UK, maybe it is similar to African countries, it is smallholder, small scale farming. It's all dispersed. Majority of the dairy farming, whether it is buffalo based or cattle based, that is extensive, majority. Although the production overall, that is dependent on the intensive farming, but the overall population is quite spread out as far as feeding systems are concerned, and hence the challenges are of very different nature. Number one, health and nutrition, health and feeding system, they are all interrelated. Because of the extensive system, there are issues in the grasslands, issues of degradation, issues of protective management of the livestock rearing. In the intensive management, there are again issues of the green fodder availability as well as dry fodder availability. Today, because all these families are dependent on livestock as their primary resource and for remaining secondary resource, and given that we are deficit in both green and dry fodder management, it affects the animal health directly. Because we are also having deficit in the concentrate, it adds to again the health issues. By and large, because of the concerted efforts by government and by private sector, dairy cooperatives, we have a very strong network of cooperatives in India, and by the organizations like BAIF. BAIF itself, we have presence across 60 states. We reach out to almost 4 million families annually for various services. With these concerted efforts, to a great extent, we are able to deal with the deficiency in the fodder, access to health services, and access to the breeding services. Despite this fact, with the concerted efforts and all, still there are gaps which needs to be addressed on top priority. These gaps are actually providing very strong network along with the support mechanism for health services. Both again through government and private and cooperative initiatives in a partnership mode. I think the health services, breeding services, genetic enhancement is still an area to be addressed. We are still dependent on majority of the low producing animals for our dairy production. So the low productivity, again because of all these issues, feed, fodder, health, is a challenge. We have to work on all of this as well as genetic enhancement of the livestock. And hence, if we are able to enhance the productivity, we will be addressing two major challenges. One, enhancing the livelihood options for the small scale dairy animal rearers, as well as reducing the methane emission. Because as we all know, the productivity of the animals is directly proportional to the level of emissions, methane emissions. And hence that becomes very important priority. Now the challenge is whether we have globally and locally in South Asian countries enough evidences, enough research gone into it to really capture how these feeding systems, how the health management systems, and how in general the rearing systems, they are affecting exactly the extent of its effect on the emissions. So that becomes an important research area for IDRC and many other organizations to consider. So research area in this and research area in the health of animals, I think will also affect, if we are able to deal with it, the resilience building among the communities and their economy. And there are, of course, many societal and cultural connects in livestock management. So with this, I stop here and I'll take other questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Barat. And I think that's, yeah, really important to highlight that there is still more research needed. We know some of what can be done, but we do need more research, and we need to be linking that evidence into policy making. And then we also need to be linking to practice. I want to recall that we have financing in our subtitle, and we have a representative here from the World Bank. So Bill, thank you so much for agreeing to join us. And I've really been reading a lot, the new report that the World Bank has put out about Recipe for a Livable Planet. And it does acknowledge that improving animal health is one way of improving livestock productivity and lowering emissions per unit of output. So what are some of the ways that climate finance, either public or private, can help farmers address these animal health issues that we've been hearing from our other panelists?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Laura. Thanks to the organizers and all the other panelists. As the last speaker, I'm probably going to repeat some of what was already said. But I think one difference is that at the World Bank, we've approached this issue and the general challenge of emissions from the agri-food system and how to address them from a global perspective, and for perhaps the first time really looked at it in a rigorous evidence-based way to understand where the challenges and opportunities are for different types of countries and how we can most cost effectively address the challenges. And as Laura mentioned, we have a flagship report, Recipe for a Livable Planet, Achieving Net Zero Emissions in the Agri-Food System, that covers this topic, both for livestock subsector as well as for the rest of the agri-food system. One of the things that we find is that greenhouse gas emissions from the agri-food system are significantly higher than what was previously thought, at nearly a third of total global greenhouse gas emissions. And livestock-related emissions, combining different livestock sources like manure and enteric fermentation, are actually the largest source of agri-food emissions at about 26% of the total. So really urgent action is needed to address this challenge, to transition to a more sustainable, lower emissions livestock production system without threatening food security. And that's key for us and for basically all of our client countries. The good news is that we can actually cut livestock emissions by up to 30% if best practices are used to improve productivity and resource use efficiency in the livestock sector. I think animal health, the topic that we're discussing today is really key because on the one hand, poor animal health leads to, what we refer to as unproductive emissions. Animals are creating greenhouse gas emissions without providing much in terms of meat or milk or other products if the animals are of poor health. On the other hand, in contrast, improved animal health is a great example of what we often refer to as a triple win solution. We talk about this a lot in agriculture and food, and I think agriculture is really somewhat unique in its ability to generate these triple win solutions, but people often ask, well, what's an example of this sort of mythical triple win solution? Well, I think honestly, improved animal health is a great example of a triple win solution. It can improve productivity, increase resilience, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and moreover, it's better for the animals themselves. And what we find is that the greenhouse gas mitigation potential from animal health interventions could be over 400 million tons of CO2 equivalent per year by 2050 in terms of emissions reductions. Moreover, those emissions reductions can be achieved at a negative cost. In other words, they actually save money for farmers and for society because they're increasing productivity at the same time and can actually deliver a net economic benefit of $5 per ton of CO2 equivalent reduced. On the other hand, climate finance for agri-food in general and livestock in particular is extremely low and needs to be scaled up dramatically. The agri-food system as a whole, that's adaptation, mitigation, everything combined, only receives about 4% of total climate finance. And again, the source of over 30% of greenhouse gas emissions, and yet receives only 4% of total climate finance, only 2% of mitigation finance. And for livestock specifically, it's estimated that it only attracts about 2% of the climate finance that's going for agriculture and land use. So really anemic levels of climate financing going to agriculture and food in general, livestock specifically. So we need to see what we can do to work together to address that. The World Bank, while it's still a drop in the bucket, we've been trying to do our part, and I'd just like to mention a few examples of where we're actually investing in improved animal health and generating climate co-benefits at the same time. One example is in the regional Sahel pastoralism support project. That's resulted in meat and milk productivity gains of 20%, and at the same time, reductions in emissions intensity of 17% per kilo of protein. I'm really happy that our colleagues from India are here because the World Bank has supported the India National Dairy Support Project, which supported animal breed improvements and improved animal nutrition. That's benefited more than 3 million smallholder farmers. And I'd just like to emphasize that smallholders, we're often asked, how do the smallholder farmers benefit from this? This project was specifically aimed at helping smallholder farmers. It resulted in a 20% increase in milk production, and at the same time, a 14% reduction in emissions of methane per liter of milk. And finally, we need to look beyond traditional approaches to project finance to innovative financial mechanisms if we're going to hope to really scale up climate finance and address these challenges. One recent case in point, the World Bank recently approved a new $350 million development policy loan for Uruguay that links interest payments on the loan to the country's ability to reduce methane emissions from livestock. So if Uruguay meets the agreed targets in terms of reducing livestock methane emissions, they can actually save up to $12.5 million in interest repayments. And so that's just another example of, some of the ways that we're actually trying to put our money where, where our mouths are, and support this agenda globally. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill. I think those are really great examples, and I'm excited to hear that, we are slowly getting more climate finance going into livestock. So we're hoping to see more of that. And I think, it takes a lot to access that climate finance, but a lot of us are up to the challenge. So Georgina, I have a couple more questions, one more for each of you. If you could keep your answer to 1 or 2 minutes, then we'll still have the time for Q&A from the audience. So Georgina, how do you see climate finance coming in to help with the challenges you were describing from sub-Saharan Africa? Is it something that you see as being a ready-to-go solution, or are there additional challenges that we still face here?
Ready to go. Don't worry about it. Yeah. No. Well, maybe so one thing that came out of the consultations that we ran was that what we're seeing in the sector are really weak public-private partnerships, particularly as these relate to small-scale farmers. However, I would say we need to be quite careful about thinking that the private sector is the best place to look for climate finance for small-scale farmers, because who pays for that? It is the farmer in the end that pays in a public-private partnership. The private sector is not getting involved for their own good. They want to see a return on investment. So I think we should be very careful in a smallholder context, thinking that the private sector is the answer, and yet I hear it all the time. So there's almost one of these conventional wisdoms that I think we need to be very careful about in this context. I think for small-scale farmers, we need to be thinking about grants. We need to be thinking about concessional loans, which means a country might receive funding in the whole country. All taxpayers are helping to repay that loan, but the burden is not sitting right on the head of a small-scale farmer, right? So I think there's some options there that we need to think about more carefully. And maybe I'll just stop there, because otherwise I'll go on forever.
Yeah, I think really good points that, of course, like we said at the beginning, diversity of contexts, and so we need diversity of climate finance within these situations as well. So I want to come working this way. Dr. Bhatt, what are the mitigation opportunities that you see in the livestock sector in India? And are there any climate finance projects that are currently being implemented that you know about?
Yeah, thank you. And before directly answering your question, thank you for NDP, National Dairy Program. India, it has really impacted to a great extent on livestock productivity. Coming back to the question, I think unfortunately, although there are great opportunities, being the largest animal population holding country, and hence we consider this as an opportunity for addressing the methane emission issue, because there is proven technological options. If we have feed additives, if there are balanced feeding, then to the extent of 25 to 30%, you can reduce the methane emission. So given this already known options and already having smallholder farming systems in India, great opportunity to really come out with a solution for financing. Unfortunately, we don't have so far such financing for smallholder based livestock management and methane reduction. Opportunities there on one side, and there is no finance. So being a greatest level of network availability in India through both, as I mentioned, the dairy cooperatives as well as the organizations like BAIF, there is possibility that with the combined approach of productivity enhancement and the management of the feeding systems and balance feeding, you can actually reduce up to at least 25% of the methane from Indian livestock system. And if you are able to do that, a big country, almost 303 million population, livestock population, bovine population particularly, huge opportunity.
Definitely a
So the
huge.
difference is we are considering livestock population in India as an opportunity for methane reduction, not as a threat or not as a challenge.
Yes, and I like that you're giving those figures of there is that opportunity there to reduce, giving existing technologies we already have. And Bill had said that one of the previous projects in India had increased milk production by 20%, and maybe the methane emission, the intensities weren't measured there, the reduction. But I think going forward, now we know, like Bill had mentioned, animal health is a triple win, and if we can get some of the climate finance going toward these options, then we can now move into measuring some of the emissions reduction wins in some of these projects. Sophie, we often hear that a cow is a reflection of what it eats, especially in terms of its health, productivity, and its environmental impact. So how can a farmer like you optimize your cattle's diets to improve their health and reduce methane emissions?
I think it's something we talk about a lot on farm. What you've just said, a cow's a reflection of what it eats, and I think it's in every system. So we're a grazing farm. This is totally relatable to an intensive farm as well, and it's about valuing making high quality feed and remembering that a healthy food is a healthy cow, healthy milk, healthy human. It's directly related. So some things, I'll keep it short, but measuring what you've got, so actually what you've got, and also that there's the whole breeding thing that comes into this as well, making sure that you're breeding the right cow for the farm. So I'm looking for a cow that's going to graze because I'm a grazing farm, and actually by doing that, I'm actually lowering my emissions because I've got a suitable cow that lasts in the system. But just high quality feed always. It's becoming more challenging, but we measure as part of our being rewarded for reducing our emissions through our milk buyer. One of those is feed efficiency and making sure that we're getting the right amounts of milk out of the feed we're putting in front of them. So it's a challenge, but it's something, valuing high quality feed is so important in any system.
That's excellent. So that feed efficiency, I think that's one of those common things that, you can do it in your own way on your farm, working on that feed efficiency. And the same topic is really important in contexts like sub-Saharan Africa, where, cows are not being fed enough, and improving even just the amount of feed there, and then looking at the feed efficiency beyond that is a good solution. Gilles, IDF represents actors in the dairy value chain beyond farmers. We've been talking a lot about farm level interventions here, but beyond farmers, how can other stakeholders, even consumers, help improve animal health for reducing greenhouse gas emissions?
Thank you. So I think it has been mentioned, but we believe that that definitely public-private partnerships are an essential part in driving sustainable livestock transformation. And that's very true, particularly true in the dairy sector. The IDF, the International Dairy Federation, is an excellent example of this. It plays a central role in advancing dairy animal health as we talk, quality, sustainability, and that's done through collaboration in part with international organizations such as FAO, WHO, the standard setting at Codex and Materius, and so on. And as you mentioned, IDF represents stakeholders across the chain. So not only from dairy farmers, but dairy processors, the entire dairy chain, government agencies, academia, research institution, and so on. And so the inclusive platform we have at IDF fosters knowledge transfer and the implementation of best practices throughout the value chain. So what we're doing is, of course, with this, we're addressing the evolving needs of the sector through scientific innovation and, more importantly, collaboration. So we work with a network of about 1,200 experts across 9 areas of work, of expertise, and this way we try to ensure that the best scientific expertise is there to promote safe, high quality, and sustainable global dairy production.
Thank you so much. So one more for Bill before we go to the audience. Just again, a little bit more on kind of these value chain actors. How do you see other actors beyond livestock keepers getting involved in improving animal health? Maybe from the input side, from AI businesses to vaccine developers and things like that. How are you looking beyond just the livestock keepers on this topic?
Yeah, thanks. And I guess I just give the sort of Reader's Digest version. First, I think it's important to talk. We talk about the climate finance and obviously World Bank. That's a topic that's close to our heart. But it's also important to talk about what policymakers can do. And one of the things that we find, which I think is really interesting and curious, is that despite the importance of livestock for climate, both adaptation and mitigation, very few countries actually include, consideration of livestock in their NDCs. And when the World Bank and other organizations look to support, interventions in a country's, particularly when it comes to climate-related interventions, we look at the NDCs, naturally to make sure that we're consistent with them. And so if countries are not including livestock in their NDCs, it makes it more difficult for providers of finance to support that. So countries, really, and we need to work with them so that they have more evidence, about what they can do on livestock in their NDCs. Second, public support for agriculture subsidies, price supports. About approximately a third of all public support to agriculture goes toward meat and milk. And most of those subsidies are independent of climate performance. So they're not linked to reducing emissions or increasing resilience. And it's estimated that those subsidies also and price supports and so on reduce the price of meat and other livestock products by 20 to 60%. So by repurposing public support to agriculture, to link it more to climate outcomes, and improved animal health, the topic we're talking about today, could be really critical. And finally, improving standards for animal health, like mandatory vaccinations, trade restrictions on diseased animals, grading systems that will actually reward farmers for producing higher quality and lower emitting livestock products could be extremely helpful. Something that I think academia and researchers like at ILRI, the CGIAR, can contribute to is improved MRV, measurement, reporting, and verification. That's another area where there's a real, I think, a lack of cost-effective, accurate technologies in measuring livestock emissions, which would help to channel more climate finance. Obviously, development finance institutions like the World Bank can help in providing finance, like I mentioned earlier, but we can also help to, in terms of our, raising awareness through our analytical work, like the kind of reports and things that we do, but also the policy dialogue that we carry out with our client countries. And finally, consumers, we haven't really talked about much, have an important role to play in terms of demanding lower emitting food products. So let me stop there given the time. Thanks.
I am thrilled that you mentioned NDCs and including livestock targets in NDCs. I think that's one of the areas I work in, and it is definitely something that can help drive climate finance into the livestock sector by having those targets in there. So I'm so happy that you mentioned that in your response there. So we do have 6 minutes for a couple questions. So if you, I don't know if we have a mic, I think maybe we do. So if you have a question, please raise your hand. All right. So I'll take these two. I think that's good. So introduce yourself, say who the question is for, and we'll take both and then do responses.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is James Nyarobi, and I'm from Tanzania. And I have a question to, I can't remember the names, but I think whoever will pick it will be okay. So there are a number of research out there with recommendations on what to do for adaptation and mitigation in the livestock sector, given different livestock production systems. So how are we translating research into action? Because for a farmer, what is important is to address the challenges that the research have identified. So research informs policy and planning, that's okay. Are we doing enough to translate this research into action? And there are a number of practices and technologies that are considered as climate smart in livestock production system. Of interest is the pastoral systems. Which production systems that can apply to the pastoral communities to be considered climate smart, and if we are ready to deal with this complicated farming system, and if it is possible to link the production systems in the pastoral settings to carbon markets, so that farmers can actually benefit from carbon credits as it is for other agricultural production systems. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think that's a 3-in-1 question deal, and maybe the topic of our next side event next year. But thank you for that. Let's go here and then think about who wants to respond to those questions.
Yeah, thank you. Michael Lee from Harper Adams University in the UK, and also UK University's Climate Network. A comment and then a question, if I may. So the first comment is, it's great, fantastic topic, really need it. We do need climate finance going into supporting animal health, but we also need to address the social license to operate, which is mentioned about the consumer, and the importance of animal welfare in that. And I haven't heard that today, and which needs to be considered, because we assume always the social license to operate. But I think the livestock sector is in danger of losing that social license to operate, and that's critical. And then question to the World Bank. Thank you. I totally agree about support for climate finance for livestock. And also the comment, and I was in a meeting earlier today about NDCs and the importance of them being represented, and particularly the livestock and agriculture within those. But also a plea and a question that we balance that in terms of net emissions of different agricultural production systems. Because although livestock might be greater emitters, they also have the land with the highest carbon stock. And we need to take into account of how we support farmers in protecting that. And of course, our current systems move away from that, because we split land use change and forestry away from agricultural food production. So farmers can't be rewarded directly for the carbon that they also protect. And of course, critically aligning to animal health is soil health and that One Health agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we'll have to give Reader's Digest versions of answers here.
Yes.
Do you want to talk about the social license to operate?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit, but I was going to talk a bit about research as well, and how research, and I think in the dairy sector is very obvious that research has been a key driver of moving the needle. And there's I'll mention a couple of examples. One is feed additive. We talk about feed efficiency. Feed additive now are getting more prevalent, like Bovaert and others. There's various, and looking at how they can over time, because it's a process over time, help reduce emission. Another example is that actually won the one of the award at the innovation award at our IDF summit in Chicago last year. It's an organization out of Canada, CMEX, Genetics, and they've done a lot of testing of milk samples, and they realized that they can predict from milk sample the methane emission of the cows. And they are working to do selection of breeds over time again, because it's not going to happen. It's going to be a slow process. But they believe that they will increase or reduce methane emission with proper breeding by 20 to 30% by 2050. So that's very, very important. Just a brief one on social license. I mean, it's very important. We all realize that. We need to, I think we need to be more, we need to explain to the consumer what we're doing and why we're there. And in dairy, as we heard probably, we need to be able to demonstrate over time that dairy is not the problem, but part of the solution for climate change. And to me, that's the key. And we need to talk outside of not only within us that maybe understand that better, but to the outside world as well. And I think we need to do a better job of doing that.
Thank you. And the good news, remembered, we are going until 2:45, not 2:30. So we have more time actually to answer these questions. No. So sorry for misunderstanding the time here, but that gives us more time to answer these two really good questions. So who wants to give another response about Michael's question on social license, and there was specifically one to Bill in there, and then James's question around translating research into action, also around carbon markets, and how pastoralism fits into this climate smart kind of approach. So anyone? Yes, Georgina.
Did you want to do that one first? Okay. Yeah, thanks for the question from Tanzania about research into action. I mean, the way that we're thinking about it in IDRC is, we have to think about it as a spectrum. So obviously we're interested in projects that do think about knowledge translation, but this is on one end of a spectrum, right? It's just converting research into usable knowledge. Think of a policy brief. Then we have projects, and most of our projects are sort of in the middle, which is much more around co-creation methodologies, working directly with farmers. You're not trying to reach out to your stakeholder once you've already done the research. I think if you're doing that, you've lost the race already. If you're doing research and hoping someone's going to pick it up. Right over to the other end of that spectrum, where we're working with projects that are actively trying to tackle the systems that hold inequality in place. So not just documenting gender differences in agricultural systems, but trying to dismantle those gender differences. And that's really about sort of deep systems change processes. So at IDRC, we work across that whole spectrum. I don't know if that's a helpful response, but I would call all of those things research. I think we really need to get away from the left-hand side of the spectrum, which is just knowledge translation after the research is finished. Yeah.
Do you want to tackle your question?
Yeah, I'm not sure I entirely understood the question, but I'll do my best. I mean, one part that I heard is rewarding farmers for good stewardship of land. I don't know if that was a question or not, but yeah, certainly I think we should reward farmers. In our report, Recipe for a Livable Planet, we take a comprehensive food systems approach to looking at the sources of agri-food emissions, and the single biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the globally in the agri-food system is still net forest conversion. So farmers in a lot of countries are actually still cutting down forests for that's net forest conversion linked to agricultural production, livestock and crop production. So in a lot of places, farmers are actually still deforesting and contributing to emissions that way. So I think that along with reducing greenhouse gas emissions directly from livestock, we should create increased incentives for farmers to provide good stewardship of the land. And in fact, what we find is that avoiding deforestation or protecting forests is actually one of the most cost-effective ways that we can reduce greenhouse gas emissions from the agri-food system. So I think that's in some ways a no-brainer, but it's not always easy to achieve.
Nice. Is it fully answered or can I supplement? Yeah, just a couple of supplementations. One is that the cultural connect between the animal rearing and the general livelihood of the people, that has been very strong in South Asian countries, and I think in African countries, particularly wherever there is extensive rearing. I think that has degraded, and in many places it has collapsed. The pasture management systems which were there traditionally, that has collapsed. And I think his point of how you actually address the issue of emissions in the grasslands. We have some experiments in India wherein grasslands are collectively managed by the communities and they are sustainably managed. Both the cut and carry system as well as to controlled grazing to some extent. This way, the hybrid system has been evolved with the community's participation. It is worth understanding that there is already a methodology in different regions within country, in Himalayan region, in desert areas and in semi-arid areas, worth adopting that. That is number one. And number two, this being an opportunity for co-benefits, I think the research already available can be translated into practice with some incentive, as you rightly mentioned. And unless there is direct productivity enhancement through the systems or technologies which we are going to introduce, farmers are not going to come forward for methane reduction. Hence, we have to start with incentives and then slowly it can be tapered down and they can fully adopt if they are going to get benefit of productivity. Thank you.
We can have a follow-up.
Sorry, thank you. I just want to come back to Bill because my comment was about in terms of the NDCs, if we're including the support of green agriculture lowering emissions, that we don't get any perverse outcomes. Because if we just look at it from a gross emissions and we don't reward farmers in terms of the ability of their interventions to remove carbon associated with land change or soil health or hedgerows or trees, we might have a situation where a land use would be better in terms of ruminants, but because of the NDC targets to reduce greenhouse gases, you get a perverse outcome and you're actually removing ruminant livestock and replacing it, say, with monocultures or chickens, etc. So I just want to make sure that we're including net emissions, because we need to induce greenhouse gases and not just gross emissions when we're looking at green finance. Thank you.
Okay, do we have, yes, there's another question there in the back.
Hi, I wanted to say thank you for having this conversation, because for too long agriculture has been totally out of the kind of climate sphere in this conversation at all. I'm a fourth year veterinary medicine student at the University of Cambridge, and my question was about the fact that veterinary medicine actually hasn't been mentioned at all in a conversation about animal health. Which is fair enough, because management is a massive part of the issues in the first place. And also I recognise most of the kind of livestock farms do not have access to veterinary care. However, most of the traditionally or historically largest kind of emitters do have access to veterinary care. I was wondering what you see the role of the vet as being. For me, a vet is a conduit between kind of disseminating the latest kind of research and what is going on in the literature with a farmer, with the primary aim of advocating for animal health or welfare. However, I've seen the growing kind of area where vets could be involved in the climate sphere, but currently education is totally non-existent and it's totally lacking. We're not connecting animal health with climate. I was wondering if anyone has any thoughts or if you've seen this put into place.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that question. I don't know who wants to handle that. Sophie, go ahead.
Yeah, it's a really good question. We have a lot of vet students through the farm, and I think that is actually first point is that we probably need. I mean, I know you have to do it as part of your course, but we need to encourage more farmers to have vets on farm as students to understand what the next generation of vets are needed, what's needed from them. But definitely the role of our vet has changed quite a lot in the last 10 years. And that's more of a holistic view of, making a management plan for the farm with the vet in terms of not just having them out at an emergency. We're quite a low input farm, organic, so we're not doing a lot of those interventions and breeding and things like that. But remembering we do need to have a relationship with the vet so that if we do have an emergency, then they actually know the farm and all of that. But also we're using them much more for testing. So with parasites and things, we're using them a lot more for things like that, preventative things. But I think it does start with that education bit where we need to get more farmers happy to have vets on farm as students. So then actually they can understand what we need from the future vets, going forward, because that is definitely changing as the climate's changing, as farming's changing.
Thank you so much. Any one final question from anyone? Yes, please.
Good afternoon. Great panel. Thanks very much. I'm Colin South. I'm CEO of a company out of Boston called Archaea Bio. We're developing a vaccine to mitigate methane. It occurs to me that there's more than half of the world's cattle represented on stage. If we look at Africa and India and the UK, that represents several gigatons of carbon emissions. What's the thing that can generate urgency and timely action? We've been talking around how to do this, but it's got a very distributed feel to it. And how do we actually accelerate? And the World Bank is probably one of the people. And what's it going to cost to do this to really make a difference in the coming 5 to 10 years around the rates of emission on farm?
A great final question. I think, how do we generate this urgency and action? Maybe I would like to ask everybody to give your 1 minute or even 30-second answer to that as we close the panel. So can we start with you, Bill?
Yeah, so thanks for the question. In fact, in our report, we actually come up with an estimate of the cost of getting to net zero emissions in the global agri-food system by 2050. And what we roughly estimate is that we need to scale up climate finance to about $260 billion a year. That's for mitigation action in the entire agri-food system, which sounds like a lot of money, but at the same time, annual public support for agriculture, subsidies, price supports, and so on is about $660 billion a year. So compared to that, maybe it's not such a huge amount. And plus, as we've talked about, it has a lot of co-benefits in terms of improving livelihoods, nutrition, and so on. Thanks.
Georgina, your takeaways and how do we generate urgency?
Oh, I'm probably not going to answer you directly. I think my take-home message would be that we need to think about this from a perspective of climate justice. These small-scale farmers that you're speaking about, I think we need to be careful not to put everyone into the same basket. When we think about emissions and urgency, I don't think we're talking about all livestock owners everywhere. And we need to take a more contextualized approach to how we think about reducing emissions in the sector.
Fantastic. Brad?
Capitalize on the great opportunity for reducing the methane emissions, increasing the pie for agri-food system and livestock within agri-food system for carbon financing through various means, and adopt the innovative approaches in financing the smallholder dairy farmers so that they have enhanced productivity, enhanced incomes and livelihood, and the co-benefit of methane reduction.
It's a great question. I think we have to remember that farms are businesses and they will follow the money. So if the customer, say the supermarkets, our customers, are incentivizing it and they need it as part of their scope 3, it's, I don't know a supermarket that's not looking at scope 3 right now. So like our milk buy is doing, incentivizing it is the only way I see from a farmer that I would change at the moment. I don't think there's enough pressure on other angles of the farm to put it to the back unless it's hitting the bottom line. So that would be money. We follow the money.
Yeah, I would say we just came out of the World Dairy Summit in Paris, and at the end of the summit, we had a document that was developed called the Dairy Declaration of Paris on Sustainability. And it's not only about farmers; it's about the whole supply chain. And that was following a declaration made in 2016. So we will. I mean, it's an effort to bring back the sector together, to measure where we are globally, and then to put an action plan moving forward that will bring all the stakeholders. And so there is an action team that's going to be put together. And we're trying to move the needle, hopefully, because you need good measure. And I think we recognize that, not every country, not every region has the capacity to move at the same speed. So we talk a little bit about the different system at the beginning of the discussion, and I think it was outlined. So we need to find a model that works the best for each of the region and each of the production system.
Thank you so much. And I thank everyone here in the audience for coming. I really enjoyed the questions. Thanks to the panelists. I really enjoyed the discussion as well. To our organizers, IDF, EDA, BAIF, IDRC, World Bank has joined us, and to Professor Jijikang, the DG of ILRI. I thank him for joining at the beginning as well. And I wish you all a fantastic day. Thank you so much for coming.